actually had the pleasure of talking to Brian Dooley about what he was going to present about before he came up and talked about it. And talking to him about this idea that universal intelligence is not God, and also the idea that we, as a profession, have mixed perspectives and thought processes on the very thing that starts our chiropractic story, this major premise, got me wondering how that could happen. Like, how does that happen? And so I had this message on my heart about the chiropractic story. And for those of you that don't know me, I actually grew up in chiropractic. I started working in chiropractic offices when I was 16. Is that a little echoey? Hello. Can we get that feedback? Thank you. So I started working in chiropractic offices when I was 16, and I was blessed to be able to go to Parker seminars at a very young age and was around tons of chiropractors. And if any of you are like me, you heard people tell you all the time, tell the chiropractic story. Did anybody hear that? Right? And if you were like me, you sat there and you went, but what's the chiropractic story? Did you ever think that? What is the chiropractic story? And what's really interesting, even to this day, I think part of our problem as chiropractors and the profession is that our story from one person to the other doesn't match up, right? I know for the longest time what my version of the story was. This idea that it's a vitalistic profession and that you have the ability to return to normal, innate intelligence can adapt and express, and you can live your most optimal life. But that was my version of the story. Think about, do you have your version of the story that you tell people? But I want you to think, is that the chiropractic story? Like, I hear it all the time, like, we need to be more like the dentists, right? Did you guys ever hear that? We need to be more like the dentist, and if we can come together and we can have a narrative that we all agree upon and get it out there into the world, into the community, then we have the ability to have people believe in this wonderful thing that we do. But we don't. So why is that? There's this really interesting thing when you look at the chiropractic profession as a whole. And I'm going to be like little Debbie Downer. Do you guys remember Debbie Downer? Wah, wah, wah. Just for a second. When we look at the chiropractic profession as a whole, are we graduating more students? Are we definitely graduating more students? And is our market share in the population increasing or decreasing? See, do you feel that Debbie Downer moment? Right? So we are not affected. We're graduating more people, which means we should be seeing more people, and our market share in this world should be increasing, and our message should be getting out there because people want what we've got. They just don't know we have it, right? So something's wrong. So what are we going to do? How can we make a change? We need to begin to look at this story, this chiropractic story, and we need to come together with a unified message so that people know this beautiful, amazing, wonderful thing that we have to offer. So what's your story? Dr. Bob Brooks says one of my favorite lines on the planet. He says, we're all looking at truth in a box. We're just looking at it through different holes. There's a lot of holes in that box when it comes to the chiropractic story. And those holes are effectively shaped by our perspective, by our past experiences, by our interactions. And you know what else they're shaped by? They're shaped by a story that you've been told that's been passed down from your mentors and your mentors' mentors and your mentors' mentors' mentors. And it's a story that you go out there and tell. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to share that. But I want to ask you, is it your version of the story? Or is it the chiropractic story? We've got to find a story and we've got to agree on it. Otherwise, our story is shaped by our perspective. I remember being in an elevator with Dr. Cohen, I think it was a couple years ago. And he said something to me that hit me in the gut. We have about 18, on average, schools in this nation. About 4 of them are teaching the vitalistic message, and the rest of them are teaching a mechanistic message. So what does that mean for the story that's out there? Because we talk about telling the story all the time, but we don't talk about how is the story being received. What is the perception of the story in the world? And if there is 18 schools and only 4 of them are telling the story that you and I in this room here believe, what does that mean about the other 14? Is their voice louder than ours? Is their voice louder than ours? Are they graduating more people that are speaking a message and a story that's not true to the principles of chiropractic? And what does that mean for us? So we've got to do a couple of things, each and every one of us, because we can make a difference. So number 1, we have to get uncomfortable, right? We've got to get uncomfortable. Did Dooley's message make you a little uncomfortable? That's the biggest problem. We're not willing to... No, I'm right. I'm Italian. We're not willing to be... And a woman, right? We're not willing to be uncomfortable. When we have a perspective, when we have an idea, when we have a perception of a way that something is supposed to be because it's the way that we've been taught, we stand strong in that. And the moments that we're made uncomfortable, what do? Oh, I'm right. You're wrong.
Okay.
If only everybody did that, the world would be a better place, right? Not fighting with me. But we need to be uncomfortable. We need to be able to look at this beautiful story in chiropractic and the story that we've been telling and say, is it right? Am I speaking what's true to the chiropractic philosophy and principles? Or maybe I need to get a little bit uncomfortable so that I too don't need to be right, but I can find the truth. So we need to be able to get uncomfortable. We need to be able to look at this idea that maybe universal intelligence is not God. That it's not God. And that goes against our perspective and our idea and what we've been taught. But if we can look at it in the way that we were just presented, and we can analyze the things that have been written before us, then we will be able to come together and understand a chiropractic story that's already been in existence, that lives in the penmanship of the Green Books, in Stevenson, in BJ, in Dee Dee. So you gotta get uncomfortable.
Right.
The chiropractic, she keeps telling me I'm right. This is really good for my ego up here. The chiropractic philosophy. We need to tell a story so that people can hear the message that we truly have. And oftentimes we're too busy fighting about the philosophy instead of preserving it. You know what I'm saying? We fight about the philosophy instead of preserving it. And please understand that philosophy is not just about talking about it. It's not something you say or you talk about. It's something you do. It's something you live. It's people like Reggie Gold that lived the philosophy in what he did. He exemplified the philosophy and it changed people's lives. It wasn't just about what he said. He didn't just talk about it, he did it. That's what you need to do. You need to do the chiropractic philosophy, not say or just talk about it. In the Bible, it says that faith without action, without works, will die. The same holds true to the chiropractic philosophy. The chiropractic philosophy without works will die. That means you and we need to do more of this. So when you look at the chiropractic philosophy and then you hear this idea of universal forces and you begin to understand that universal forces are destructive in nature, and then you began to look and analyze what these are, and then all of a sudden you stumble on this idea that the universal force is also an adjustment. Are you analyzing and taking care of people in a way that you're honoring and have reverence for that very thing that you do that's a universal force? That's destructive in nature? You've got to do and live the philosophy. And if we can do that, more people will get on board. More people will see the message. And when you see the message, you can attach to it much greater.
God bless you.
So read the story. Can you guys, this is great. I'm gonna stand right here. So read the story. We ask ourselves, what is the chiropractic story? The story's already been written and it lives in these books. We don't have to be like the dentists. We don't have to come together and come up with a narrative, because the narrative already lives right here. Dooley said it, and I 100% agree. If you haven't picked up a green book in, well, we won't even ask, but if you haven't picked up a green book, start with Stevenson's chiropractic textbook. Because within that book lives the 33 principles, lives the cycles, lives universal intelligence, lives innate intelligence, lives the idea of constructive and destructive survival values, all of the things that are written for us to be able to tell a story and do a story and explain this very thing called chiropractic that allows people to have a life that they never thought they could. If you want to reach more people, if you want to touch more lives, if you want this chiropractic profession to thrive, not just survive, we've got to all tell the same story, because there's power in that. So read the story. Dooley already stole my slides, I think, but Stevenson says in that book that chiropractic is a deductive science. That means that we take something like a premise and we deduce down from that premise. God, these guys were so smart. They wrote a story for you and laid it out in a way that was digestible, understandable, and then can be regurgitated for people to pick up, hold on to, and know this beautiful thing that we have. They said, hey, it's a deductive science, so guess what we're going to do? We're going to start with some principles, and we're going to start with a major premise, and we're going to deduce all the way down. And they gave us the major premise, and that's the beginning of the story. Brian Dooley just came up here and gave you the first stepping stone to the chiropractic story that has already existed for each and every one of us. So I would urge you to look at all of the other principles, look at what's inside of that book, and look at it in a way that he did with principle number 1, because if you can understand the philosophy and the principles on a deeper level, you and I will have the same story. We will be doing the same things. We will be saying the same things. And we will have a unified message because it was already given to us without us having to create that narrative. Read the story. The story goes from a universal to an individual, from immaterial to the material. It's beautifully laid out. The principles and the philosophy should be our guide. I love the idea of the three-legged stool, but in reality, it's really more like a tree. The philosophy are the roots of that tree that feed everything else we do. It explains the science. It explains the art. And if you let that tree be able to grow from the philosophy and the foundation that you build upon, you're only going to grow big and strong. So again, if you ever have questions about chiropractic, what it is, what it isn't, go to the philosophy, and if you stand upon that, and I stand upon it, we will have a unified message to reach more people. And so that way, our voice can be so much louder than all of these students that are graduating from these 14 other colleges that are teaching them a mechanistic story that doesn't exist in these books. So do the philosophy through the science and art. This is another story. You all love this story? We hear this story all the time, and this is part of our message. We're going to just take a little look at it.
Just think, the power that rests in your hands, provided you'll make it work. A slip on the sidewalk is a small thing. It happens to many. A fall from a ladder is a small thing. That happens to many. The slip or the fall produces a subluxation, and that subluxation is a small thing. The subluxation produces pressure on the nerve, and that pressure is a small thing. And the pressure cuts off the flow of mental impulses, and that decreased flowing is a small thing. And that decreased flowing produces a diseased body, and that is a big thing for that man. Then multiply that sick man by 1,000, and you control the physical and mental welfare of a city. Multiply that man by 1,000,000, and you shape the physical and mental destiny of a state. And multiply that man by 156 million, and you forecast and can prophesy the physical and mental stages of a nation. So the slip or the fall, the subluxation, the pressure, the flow of mental impulses, and this is big enough to control the thoughts and actions of a nation. That's the power that rests with you. Now comes the man. Any one man's small thing. This man gives an adjustment, and that adjustment is a small thing. The adjustment replaces the subluxation, that's a small thing. And the adjusted subluxation releases pressure upon nerves, and that's a small thing. The released pressure restores health to a man, and that is a big thing to that man. Multiply that well man by 1,000, and you step up the physical and mental stages of the city. Multiply that well man by 1,000,000, you increase the efficiency of a state. And multiply that well man by 156 million, and you have produced a healthy, wealthy, and better race for posterity. So the adjustment of the subluxation, to release pressure upon nerves, to restore mental impulse flow, to restore health, is big enough to rebuild the thoughts and actions of the world. So the idea that knows the cause, that can correct the cause of disease, is one of the biggest ideas I know.
I know, you gotta give it up for BJ, right? One of the best stories he ever told, and that lives in those books. And it's a story that starts off with something super, super small, and it can work its way into having an impact bigger than we can ever understand. The capacity of chiropractic is so much bigger than the people out there in the world know. And we have to figure out how to let them know and understand that something that small can have that impact. And if you sit there and you become complacent and you don't look into this message, into this story, something that small can have an impact too. So I want to share one last thing with you before you go. Because this is what's happening in those 14 other schools that we need to raise our voice above so that this doesn't impact our world in this way. A chiropractor who does not understand chiropractic and is disconnected is a small thing. It happens to many. A chiropractor then touches and educates a patient in their city, which is a small thing. It also happens to many. This chiropractor misinforms the patient about chiropractic and fails to deliver true chiropractic to that patient, who ultimately fails to become connected to their innate life potential. That is a big thing to that patient and their family. This is also a big thing to that chiropractor's practice. Multiply that disconnected chiropractor by 100, and you misinform and fail to deliver true chiropractic to the community. Multiply that disconnected chiropractor by 70,000, and you misinform and fail to deliver true chiropractic to the entire world of chiropractic. So one chiropractor who does not understand chiropractic and is disconnected is big enough to shape and control the thoughts and actions of an entire profession. Let's raise our voices, make them loud, read the story, understand the story, so that we can continue to tell a story that already existed and that we all agree upon, so that people can know what we have to offer, and more lives can be saved. Thank you very much.
Lacey.